Oh. Okay.
All right, folks. Well, welcome. It is 12:01 and we have a lot of content to cover today. So I am going to jump right in and we're going to let people in as they are able to join us. Thanks so much for being here for our 12 noon session on the Grants for Organizations program, specifically looking at new organizations and the intent to apply application process. My name is Laura Weiss. I am a program director here at the Maryland State Arts Council, and I am joined by my colleague and co-program director, Emily Sollenberger. Hi, Emily. And I think we have a couple other staff members here as well. So thank you so much for everybody for being here. Let me just organize my screen real quick so I can see everything. All right. Just to orient you to Zoom, you are probably familiar with most of these features, but in case you just need a little bit of orientation, please be aware of the microphone and video buttons that are towards the left-hand side of your control bar. We do ask that you please remain on mute during the session, unless, of course, you are asking a question. We just want to avoid any kind of background noise. It's entirely up to you if you are on video or not. However you are comfortable is fine by us. There is a chat function that's kind of in the middle of the control bar. Emily's keeping an eye on the chat right now, and we'll go back and forth to try to answer as many questions as possible through chat. We'll also put some links in there throughout the presentation as well. There is a raise hand function that's probably under your reactions menu. You can feel free to use that if you have a question throughout. We're going to try to get through the bulk of the presentation and then we'll have plenty of time for questions at the end. So you might just want to hang on till the end, but we'll do our best to answer everything that we can. You should also have the ability to turn on closed captions if you need those. They are computer generated. And then finally, on the right-hand side, there should be the little end button. So just avoid that until you are ready to leave the meeting. All right, I'm going to start with our grounding slides. We start all of our presentations with the following slides. The first is our equity and justice statement, and that is that the arts celebrate our state's diversity, connect our shared humanity, and transform individuals and communities. The Maryland State Arts Council and its supporting collaborators are committed to advancing and modeling equity, diversity, accessibility, and inclusion in all aspects of our organizations and across communities of our state. Msac and its grantees are committed to embracing equity and non-discrimination regardless of race, religious creed, color, age, gender expression, sexual orientation, class, language, and/or ability. The next slide is our land acknowledgement statement. This is a relatively new statement that we have adopted as a council. There's lots of really great information about land acknowledgements on our website, so we encourage you to take a look at that when you have a chance. We acknowledge the lands and waters now known as Maryland are the home of its first peoples, the Accohonic Indian Tribe, Assateague Peoples Tribe, Cedarville Band of Piscataway Indians, Choptico Band of Indians, Lenape Tribe, Nanticoke Tribe, Nassau-Wawash Band of Indians, Piscataway Conoy Tribe, Piscataway Indian Nation, Pocomoke Indian Nation, Susquehannock Indians, Youghiogheny River Band of Shawnee, and tribes in the Chesapeake watershed who have seemingly vanished since the coming of colonialism. We acknowledge that this land is now home to other tribal peoples living here in diaspora. We acknowledge the forced removal of many from the lands and waterways that nurtured them as kin. We acknowledge the degradation that continues to be wrought on the land and waters in pursuit of resources. We acknowledge the right of the land and waterways to heal so that we can continue to provide food and medicine for all. We acknowledge that it is our collective obligation to pursue policies and practices that respect the land and waters so that our reciprocal relationship with them can be fully restored. The vision of the Maryland State Arts Council is to play an essential role ensuring every person has access to the transformative power of the arts. And we do that through our mission, which is to advance the arts in our state by providing leadership that champions creative expression, diverse programming, equitable access, lifelong learning, and the arts as a celebrated contributor to the quality of life for all of the people of Maryland. We're currently operating under a strategic plan that was adopted in 2019. And in that strategic plan, we have 5 specific goals. And those goals include to increase participation, provide intentional support, build capacity, leverage connections, and bolster Maryland arts. And today's session is really honing in on goal 2, which is to provide intentional support. We begin all of our public meetings with what we call our creative meeting actions. So we invite you to really embrace these ideas throughout our time together today. And that is to celebrate being in the space with other creative people, engage with everyone's presence as a gift, acknowledge that together we know a lot, enter the conversation with curiosity and inquiry, share your idea and trust that it will be heard, use I statements. Focus your language on the task at hand. Hold one another accountable with care. Apply yes and, I hear your idea and I'm going to add to it. And balance speaking and listening. We just want to call out some of our professional development opportunities that are taking place here with the Maryland State Arts Council. Oops. Didn't mean to do that. There's lots of different opportunities that happen virtually that you can sign up for on our Eventbrite page. We are coming into the fall season, so we're kind of ramping back up with lots of different webinars and workshops and different things that are happening. Our Coffee with the Council sessions will start up again in September. Those take place every other Tuesday morning online, and it's a great opportunity to connect with other artists, to connect with our council. It's kind of an open discussion forum, sometimes with a topic, sometimes not. So we'd love to see you come check that out if you have time. We're also going to be having fall regional art summits, which we're sort of reframing more as regional office hours. So we'll be actually out there in person to be able to meet with you throughout the state. So stay tuned for more information on that. And you can find out about these and all of the other offerings on our Eventbrite page. Finally, this is just a little bit of a call out and advertisement to consider joining us as a panelist. We are always looking for individuals to join us as panelists in our different programs. We have a couple of different calls for panelists currently open, I believe. I think we still have our County Arts Development, and I want to say there is a Maryland Traditions one as well. I can't remember which one off the top of my head, but do check out the ways to get involved page on our website. There's a full listing of information about the opportunities to join us as a panelist. You work very closely with staff, with the program directors and the program teams to learn about how to evaluate applications, how to score them using rubrics. Sometimes there are panel meetings involved, sometimes not, depending on the program. And most importantly, it is a paid position. There is compensation involved with your service. So if that's of interest to you, please do check out the website. All right, to today's agenda, we are here really focused on the Grants for Organization program, specifically the intent to apply for new organizations to join the program. So we are going to go through a review of the Gfo program today. Grants for Organization, Gfo, you're going to hear that a lot today. We'll go through the eligibility guidelines. We're going to talk about the Gfo timeline and the next steps that kind of go through the entire process if you do indeed go through with that intent to apply and you are accepted into it. We'll take a look at the intent to apply application. We'll walk through Smart Simple, which is our grants platform. We'll talk a bit about the funding formula that is used for the GFO program. And of course, we will have plenty of time for questions and answers at the end. So just to point out the note at the bottom here, that this is an overview for the intent to apply portion of the GFO program. So there will be information sessions for both the on-year and the off-year applications later this fall. But today we're really going to be concentrated on that first step, which is intent to apply. All right, Emily, I'm going to hand it over to you to kick us off.
Great. Thanks so much for the intro, Laura. And hi, everybody. It's so great to see so many faces today for this particular session around the Grants for Organization program. I just wanted to note that I put a couple different links as Laura was chatting in the chat box. So if you haven't opened that up, those direct links will help you out today too, including the Grants for Organization program page is a good starting point. But again, we're going to go into more detail here about the program, and that'll just be a useful resource as you're moving forward. But to provide a quick overview of the Grants for Organization program, the purpose of this particular program is to provide operating support that strengthens and sustains Maryland's arts infrastructure. That's really focusing on general operating support to our organizations or arts programs within the arts sector across the state. And just a quick reference point here in FY23, which is the current fiscal year we're in, we just awarded nearly $17 million in GFO funding to 283 organizations across the state. So we're really thrilled that we've been able to increase the number of organizations we've supported over the past, gosh, three years now, Laura, right? We've seen an increase. So we're so thrilled to see so many faces here, and hopefully we'll add to that list of growing organizations that we support here. All right, so to go through some of the basics, again, this is just the starting point for new organizations. So we're going to start at the very basics, as I mentioned. So there's kind of two categories, if you will, for who can apply. So in general, it's our arts organizations to provide general operating support. In our guidelines, you'll see GOG reference as well. That's really just general operating grant. These are nonprofit organizations whose purpose is producing or presenting the arts through public programs or services. Applicants must be arts organizations or organizations whose missions purpose is producing or presenting the arts through public programs or services, such as arts museums, orchestras, galleries, theaters, art centers, etc. So these are the folks that have arts within their mission, essentially. The other category is an arts program grant or PRG program. You'll see that within the guidelines as well and referenced. These are also nonprofit organizations whose primary purpose is other than producing or presenting the arts, but they have ongoing public arts activities through public programs throughout the year. So the mission of these types of organizations may not specifically be dedicated to the arts, but they do have that arts programming happening throughout the year on an ongoing basis. So these are considered non-arts organizations for the State Arts Council purposes, and in particular, this grant program. So some examples of an arts program might be community centers, churches, non-arts museums, libraries, or universities. So a good example might be the University of Maryland is a non-arts-based university. However, we support the art galleries through the university. So the art gallery would be considered an arts program within the GFO context. Okay, so some further eligibility here. Arts organizations and programs, they must be a 501c3 nonprofit, a unit of government, a school, and they can also be fiscally sponsored under what we call a Model A agreement. And that would be that a fiscal sponsor would have financial oversight and really provide that fiscal oversight for an organization. Organizations must be incorporated in Maryland as a nonprofit or have a significant physical presence in Maryland. An organization must have operated as an arts organization or an arts program for one full fiscal year, and be able to submit a full financial statement for their most recently completed fiscal year at the time of the application. The other piece is that the organization or the program have an allowable income number of over $50,000. Okay. So who can apply? Continued here is if you are a returning applicant, so if you've received the grants for organization funding for the current fiscal year, which you would have gotten an award notification in July. If you got that award notification, you've already been accepted into the GFO program. So you actually do not need to complete an intent to apply form. However, if you are a new applicant and did not receive funding in FY23, you would need to submit an intent to apply application that is due September 15th each year and be formally accepted into the program. So again, if you received funding in FY23, no need to submit this form. You're already in. You're going to get reminders from Laura or myself about when to submit that application. But if you're new and you're learning this information, have not been funded through the program before, you will need to fill out that intent to apply. Okay. So what can it support? This program is really to support the general operations of our organizations and programs across the state. So this is not a project-specific grant program. We have other programs that are dedicated to project support. This is really supporting the entire organization to continue their mission-driven work. So that can include things such as programming and materials, supplies. It can cover marketing and promotional activities, personnel and any of those associated expenses, operations such as rent or a mortgage, utilities, internet, phone, those sorts of things, any type of professional development activities. So really any of those general annual expenses that are needed to continue that mission work. Okay. And then what can't it support? So as a state agency, we do have some non-allowable expenses. And again, all of these are within the guidelines too with more details, but in general, what we see most frequently and are asked questions about, these funds are not dedicated to re-granting or scholarships to pass through one organization to another. It is not for capital improvements. They're really for activities that are for the public. So if it's activities that are not open to the public, activities that are primarily therapeutic, those would not be eligible expenses under the GFO program. It also doesn't support any outside travel outside the state. And with any State Arts Council grants, the funds cannot be used for political contributions. And if you're not sure, you can just be in touch with Laura or myself and we can talk through the different scenarios and questions that you might have. And this is just a fun little graphic that's also on our website. It's a kind of a checklist, if you will, and we're going through this as we speak. So it's just a good kind of starting point to make sure that you're in the right place and in the right program. All right, Laura, I'm going to pass it back to you to get into the application.
All right, great. Thanks so much, Emily. So the application itself will be completed in Smart Simple, which is our grants platform, and we'll go through that registration process at the end here. But there are different things that are required as part of the application. Most of this is really questions associated with eligibility. That's the primary intent with the intent to apply, is to make sure that you are indeed eligible for the program. The first thing that is needed is a slightly new requirement, and that is that you will need to submit your organization's unique entity identifier, or UEI. This is a new, it's not a number, it's a series of numbers and letters, but it is taking the place of the former DUNS number. As a nonprofit organization, you should be assigned this through sam.gov. If you do not have this information, you will need to register to get it before you can submit your intent to apply. If you have questions about this, reach out to Emily or myself and we can provide some resources about that. You will need to share your 501c3 determination date and your IRS letter of determination as an attachment as part of the application. And if you are fiscally sponsored, we do have some information that we need about that, and we need to see that we need proof that you are operating under a Model A agreement. So that is in the form of an attachment between you and your fiscal sponsor. And again, if you have questions about what needs to be included in that, you can reach out to Emily or myself. The questions associated with eligibility within the application really kind of mirror that graphic that Emily just shared in the previous slide, but just to run through them, it will ask, does your organization have ongoing programs to produce or present the arts to the public? Yes or no question. Is your organization incorporated in Maryland or have a significant physical presence in Maryland? Also a yes or no question there. And has your organization operated for one full fiscal year? And again, that's a yes or no question. Looking at financial eligibility, as Emily shared before, we do require a minimum total allowable income from the previous fiscal or calendar year of at least $50,000. So there is a question that says, is your organization's total allowable income from FY22 or calendar year 21 at least $50,000? If it is under $50,000, you are not eligible for this program, but you can apply for general operating support through the Creativity Grant. We're not going to get into the details of Creativity today, but you can find another recording about Creativity will be on our website very shortly. We just hosted that the other day, but there are options for your organization. It's just that GFO isn't quite the right fit for you. There is the requirement for a financial statement or an audit for the most recently completed fiscal year, either FY22 or calendar year 21, depending on your organization's timeline there. If your organization has allowable income of over $600,000, an audited financial statement will be required at the time of the application. If it's under $600,000, we just need a signed financial statement, such as a profit and loss statement. There is a question that has a drop-down menu that asks for the artistic category that most accurately characterizes the work of your organization. This really just helps us know which discipline you would fall under so that we are able to best determine the panel to review your application throughout the process. So it gives you a couple of different options, and we just ask that you characterize the work the best you can. It will also help us determine if you are working more closely with myself or with Emily. We divide the disciplines just so that we have different points of contact. I work primarily with the performing and literary arts organizations. Emily works primarily with our visual media, multidisciplinary, folk and traditional, and arts services organizations. Hopefully I didn't miss any there, Emily. I think I got them all. So that's something for you to determine in the application. The next couple are some brief narrative sections. The first is just to state your organization's mission statement and goals for those arts activities for which you are applying. The next one is a question that asks, within your geographic area of service, identify the percentage of programming that serves the community. And by community, we are looking for those other than tuition paying constituents. In this scenario, what we are classifying as tuition paying includes programming with a fee for service model. So that would include classes, camps, workshops, anything that the students are paying a tuition. So that's what we're looking for in this case. And then finally, there's a section for you to indicate any questions or concerns that you have regarding your application. And that just helps us to be able to address those for you moving forward in the process. So that's really the content of the application itself. The applications are due on September the 15th. So you do need to submit those in Smart Simple by end of day on September the 15th. What happens from there is that the program directors, myself and Emily, will review all of those applications to determine the final eligibility. Once we go through all of those applications, if we have any follow-up questions or anything like that, we will reach out to you to ask those and get clarity around that. And then we send out notifications in early October to let you know if you've been accepted to move forward in the GFO process or not for this, this current cycle. If you are accepted into the program, you would then complete a full, what we call on-year application, which would be due on November the 15th, 2022. If you're not approved to move forward for this particular cycle, then we'll suggest some other programs that might fit your organization better at this time. That might include the Creativity Grant as another option for general operating support. All right, Emily, you want to go through the on-year, off-year cycle?
Sure. Thanks, Laura. And I'll just note that there have been a couple of questions in the chat that I've got to, but we'll also spend some time towards the end to answer some more questions and provide our contact information as well. But generally, you've heard us use the words on year and off year a couple of times here. Once you're in and accepted to the Grants for Organization program, we have what we call a 3-year cycle that is by artistic discipline. So during your on year, your organization will complete a full application. It's a little bit longer. You'll go through a full panel process, which determines a panel score, which has helped to determine your funding. So that happens every 3 years. And as a new organization, you'll complete an on-year, that full application and panel review as a new organization. So everybody who's accepted as a new organization will be in an on-year. And then if you're in an on-year by discipline, you will also go through the same panel review process as well. During the off years, there are 2 years in between in this 3-year cycle. The organization would complete a shorter application and not go through a panel review process. So the panel score essentially stays with an organization for 3 years. This upcoming year, as all of our new organizations will complete the on year for FY24, along with discipline-specific organizations. So that includes our theater organizations, service organizations, folk and traditional organizations, and our multidiscipline B organizations. So everybody in those categories will be completing a full application. Those who will not will be everybody else listed in the categories below. So then cycling into the next year for FY25, you'll see music, literary, visual and media arts, and then all the new organizations for next year will complete the on year for FY25, and then following FY26, music C, dance, multidiscipline A, and the new organizations for that year. So then it kind of just cycles through. So basically about a third of our organizations are in an on year each year, and the other 2/3 are off. That just helps with capacity for everybody, you as an applicant, along with State Arts Council staff, and we trust the process moving through this. It's worked pretty well over the years. So anybody can go into an on year at any time if they choose to get that new panel score. But traditionally we stick with these discipline specific. So as a new organization, you might find yourself in a different category that is not an on year. So within this new year in FY24, you'll complete an on year, but maybe you'll fall into the visual and media category. The following year, you would then complete another on year to get into your discipline track. Similar, if you may find yourself in dance, you'd fill out an on-year application as a new organization this year. And then in FY26, you'll find yourself in an on-year again, and then you would be in your discipline rotation from there. Okay. Moving forward, once you've determined where you're at in this process, this is the general timeline that you can expect from year to year. So in August and September, you'll see we're here. The intent to apply application is currently open in Smart Simple. We try to open it in August to hit that September 15 intent to apply deadline. So September 15th every year is the intent to apply for our new organizations who did not receive funding the previous year. Then in October and November, as Laura and I mentioned earlier, we go through and we accept the folks into the program. Then we open up the on-year and the off-year applications in Smart Simple so folks can start to work on those. As we've mentioned, as a new organization or anybody in an on-year will complete that longer application on November 15th. So again, every year it's the same date. Sometimes it falls on a different day. Sometimes it falls on a weekend, but it's always November 15th for that consistency. Then in December and January, panelists are assigned to your application and they review and score independently online on their own time. The staff then also reviews your application, and Laura or myself will review and score your financials. So there's two different pieces there that make up your full panel score. Then as we move forward in February and March, the panelists complete what we call extension assignments. These are site visits and in-depth conversations that our panelists hold with our organization to get additional information and be advocates for you through the panel process. So all those extension assignments are completed by March 15th. And moving forward here, in late March, early April is when we have panel meetings by discipline, and those are open to the public. In May and June, once this panel process is completed, we then determine recommendations for funding that are made to our council by the staff based on the panelists' feedback and scoring. Grant amounts are determined based on the State Arts Council budget for the year. Then after July 1st, so the start of that new fiscal year, so that would be July 1st, the start of FY24, we will prepare to send notifications to all the GFO grantees through our Smart Simple grant portal. Then July and August, our staff, Laura and myself, prepare our feedback forms for anybody who went through the panel process. So that's about a third of those organizations. We pull all the feedback together into a form and send it to you. And then ongoing throughout the year, we are available to answer questions, provide support, meet with staff, board, attend any type of program or event, and just really being in touch to make sure that we can best support you and visit you in your spaces. I'll also note that we have reports that are connected to folks that are awarded programming or awarded funding through the GFO program. Interim reports are due January 31st. So this is a mid-year check-in point. And then final reports are due on August 15th every year. Again, those dates don't change. They stay the same year after year, no matter the day of the week. So that's a lot. It's a very long, extensive program. It takes a long time. So that's why we start pretty early to ensure that there's enough time to get through the full process before the fiscal year starts. Okay. And then as we mentioned a couple of times here is that the grants for organization funding is formula based. So rather than requesting a specific amount, from you all, we really we look at three main pieces that are provided through the application process. The total allowable income, which is provided by the previous year's financial statement, you provide that within the application process. And that's something that Laura and I review together or review separately and ensuring that the total allowable income number is true and matches your financial statements. The panel score, which is determined through that on your application review process. The cap allocation percentage, which is a percentage that's determined through the State Arts Council's budget allocation process. And new this year, we will be implementing an equitable funding formula. So it'll also incorporate the tier that you find yourself in, which is based on the size of your organization. So with that formula, we get to a grant amount. So an example might be your total allowable income might look like $500,000. You might get a 90% panel score, and then your cap allocation percentage might be at a 7% for the year. And that award would be a $31,500 award. So again, as you can see, the variables may change year to year as new organizations come in, different allocations are determined. This formula, the variables change, so the formula, your amounts might go up, down, depending on the year. Okay. And again, new this year is we're implementing this new equitable funding formula where the formula essentially will stay the same. What's changing is the cap allocation percentage. So while it is still based on the budget allocation, we are also adding another layer that is based on your budget size. So essentially, we will be having 5 different tiers, if you will. And you can see on the slide here that where you might find yourself, and this is all based on your allowable income. And there are some goals that that we've determined that we will be working through over a 5-year transition period. So this is essentially year 1 of 5, and we'll be moving towards these goals over the next 5 years based on the tier that you might find yourself within. And this was determined through a public editing process that we had last year of different panelists, experts, and those with different experience across the art sector to help us get to this point. Okay. And then in addition to the different tiers, this editing panel also helped us determine some other goals that we'll be reaching towards as well in this new equitable funding formula. We determined that there will be some grant amount caps for certain organizations that might reach higher than $1 million in their award amount. So those are some of our larger organizations. In year 1, where we've never had a cap before in the amount of grant awards, we will be implementing that nobody would receive a grant of over $1.4 million. And over the course of 5 years, we will be lowering that to $1 million at year 5. The cap will be $1 million for any organization within this program. Some additional priorities that the editors came up with during this 5-year transition, that those that find themselves in tier 1 will increase at a faster rate during the 5-year transition. So those in tier 1 are our smaller organizations. Those in tier 2 would increase steadily over the next 5 years. Those in tier 3, so those are kind of our mid-size organizations, will remain stable during this transition. And those in tier 4 and 5, so those are our larger organizations, do not decrease at a rate greater than 1.5% annually. So this is just a lot of math and different percentages and priorities that Laura and I will take into account as we determine the funding formulas in this upcoming year. All right, Laura, I'm going to pass over to you for the FAQs.
Sure, thank you so much. And again, thank you for the questions in the chat. I've gotten to a couple of them, but certainly we will also hold space for questions at the end. But these might also address some of your questions. So just to clarify, we've said it a few times, but just to say it again here, the question being, I've received GFO funding for FY23. Do I need to complete an intent to apply? The answer is no. So if you have recently received notification of your FY23 GFO funding, that means that you are already in the Grants for Organizations program, and you do not need to complete an intent to apply. If you did not receive FY23 funding through the Gfo program, that's when you would need to submit the intent to apply for the upcoming cycle, which is FY24. I just have a one-time activity that needs support. Should I apply to GFO? The answer to this is probably not. GFO funding is really meant to support ongoing general operations for arts organizations or programs within organizations. So if you are looking for one-time support for a specific project or event or something like that, there's likely another program that would be a better fit for you. That likely would be the Creativity Grant, but we can certainly talk one-on-one to help point you in the right direction for which program would be best suited for that kind of thing. My organizational income fluctuates around the $50,000 requirement. Should I apply to the GFO program? This is really a maybe situation, and it really would make sense to connect with either myself or Emily to discuss this in further detail one-on-one. There's lots of things to take into consideration if you're kind of dancing back and forth, maybe 1 year a little bit under 50,000, 1 year a little above 50,000 when it comes to that income requirement. So we'd really want to have a conversation to talk about the capacity of the organization, what your upcoming goals and objectives and programs and things like that look like, what your financial picture is looking like. And then we can help to really weigh those pros and cons as to, if GFO is the right fit at this point, or if it makes sense to continue on with general operating support through the creativity program for a few more years until you really get over that $50,000 requirement. But we're happy to have those one-on-one conversations to talk about that with you. Do I need to submit an audit with my application? This is a possibly situation. So all organizations have to submit some sort of financials with their application. If your income is under $600,000 annually, then all we need is a signed statement, such as a profit and loss statement signed by your treasurer or whoever handles your finances. If your organization has income of over $600,000 annually, then you are required to submit a board-approved audit with the application. This is kind of a tricky question, and we get this one frequently, and that is my organization will be applying for FY24 funding through the GFO program for the first time. Can I apply for FY23 creativity funding? And the answer here is actually yes, because they are in separate fiscal years. So once the organization receives funding through the GFO program, then you would no longer be eligible to receive funding through the creativity program. But while you're going through that application process, since you are not currently receiving funding through GFO in the current year, FY23, then you are eligible to apply for creativity funding right now in FY23 while you're completing the process for FY24 GFO funding. That can get very confusing when you're looking at the different fiscal years. So Emily and I can help you if you're confused about what you're eligible for. But we want to make sure basically that every year you're able to get some kind of general operating support, whether that's through creativity or GFO. Just something to know as you go through the application process is that Emily and myself, we are available to review applications. We're available to meet about your application really throughout the entire process. So if you're looking for feedback to make sure you're on the right track, we can take a look at that. We're happy to do that. We do recommend allowing for at least 10 business days to receive that written feedback. We oversee many different programs and we're often balancing feedback in lots of different programs. So just make sure that there is a bit of time built into your timeline, but please do feel free to reach out and we're happy to take a look at your application. If you do go through the entire GFO process, that would include the panel review. We can also pull the panelist feedback once you get to the end of it. So this time next year, over the summer, we'll pull all of the panelist feedback as well to share that with you, so you have that for reference for the future. Just to talk a little bit about our arts relief funding. This is changing hats just slightly, but it's all related. This year, you may have heard that we have a significant amount of arts relief funding that is available through many different channels. But for organizations, that's really looking at organizations that are receiving general operating support so that they are then able to apply for additional funding through that arts relief program. So if you're on this call and you have received FY23 GFO funding and you're not submitting an intent to apply for FY24, you will have the opportunity to apply for that additional arts relief funding through another application. It will be a brief application that will be available this fall. And we'll have more information for you about that very shortly. If you are not currently in the GFO program, you can receive that FY23 general operating support through Creativity. And then once approved for the general operating support through Creativity, you would also have that opportunity to apply for additional arts relief funding through the Arts Relief Program. Again, it'll be a very brief application that you would basically have access to once you are approved for that general operating support through the Creativity program. You must submit your Creativity application by February 5th, 2023 to be considered for this additional relief funding opportunity. So definitely put that on your calendar or store that date in your mind. We recommend applying sooner rather than later, just so that we can make sure that you get into that general operating pool. And then we'll have specific information and instructions that we'll send out to the Creativity grantees, along with the FY23 GFO grantees as well, about how to fill out this application and when it is due. We'll have more information on that very, very shortly. All right. Just a quick walkthrough now of Smart Simple, which is our grants platform. I think that probably many of you are already registered within Smart Simple. But if you are not, you would need to register as an organization to submit your GFO intent to apply application. To do that, you go to marylandarts.smartsimple.com. If you already are registered, you would enter in your email and your password and click login. If you need to create that registration, click the little blue register button that's in the lower left-hand corner, and it will go through a couple of prompts to get some basic contact information about your organization. So once you get all set up and you are logged in, you will come to a dashboard, which will give you a couple of different options, but you want to look for the funding opportunities menu. It will look something like this. If you click on that funding opportunities menu, it will open up all of the different applications that you would be eligible for as an organization. The one that you want to look for is the Grants for Organizations application, and you'll see next to the Apply Now button, it says Intent to Apply. So you would click that blue Apply Now button, and it will open the Intent to Apply application for you. It will look something like this. And you want to make sure once you get to that grant application portion, click the Save Draft button at the bottom of the screen to start your application. It will appear blank until you do that, so make sure that you hit Save Draft to sort of activate and start the application. Once you do that, it will basically walk you through everything that you need to complete. There are a couple of different tabs with different contact information, the eligibility questions that we went through before. Many of these just have drop-down questions or answers, either yes or no, depending on your response to the question. And there's a couple of narrative sections as well. And it will also walk through the attachments that are required as part of the application. Once you are finished with that, you would just complete and click the submit button at the bottom of your screen. You don't have to complete the entire application in one sitting. You can come back to it. Just make sure that you do hit Save Draft throughout the process. It doesn't auto save. So make sure if you're not going to submit it all in one sitting, make sure that you do click that Save Draft so you don't lose anything. And that's everything. We got through a lot of information in about 50 minutes there. So we have about 10 minutes available here for some questions and answers. I know that there's been some activity in the chat. Emily, is there anything that we should circle back?
Yeah, there were a few questions around the financials, and we're using the terms allowable income and allowable expenses, or non-allowable and non-allowable expenses. Essentially what we're looking for when you're providing a financial statement are your annual income and annual expenses. Those are typically allowable. So for example, for allowable income, those would generally be any of your earned revenue streams for the year. So if you're have program income, membership fees, tuition fees, those sorts of things for your programs, that would be considered allowable income, along with most sources of contributed revenue streams. So those would be your individual giving, corporate support and sponsorships, foundation support, any government support from the state, city, federal, and any additional sources there. Something that would be considered non-allowable income would be anything that would support your a capital renovation or capital support, something like that, support towards an endowment, in-kind support. So really, again, we're just looking for a snapshot for the year. So those income and expenses throughout the year. So that's why we do ask for a completed financial statement. So again, that P&L statement, that profit and loss statement, should show your income and your expenses for that completed fiscal year, or the audit, as Laura mentioned, should also show your income and expenses for that last completed year. Somebody else asked a question about, well, what if my audit isn't complete by the time of the intent to apply? That's okay. Just supply us with your most completed fiscal year. You can supply an internal document, but what we'd be looking for at the time of application would be that completed audit. If you're over a $600,000 annual income. So again, you only need that audit if you're over that threshold. You can also supply it if you're under that. That's great. That's a great best practice to have that. But again, and if you're not sure, if you think you might be a little bit delayed, just be in touch with Laura and myself, and we can walk through that together in that particular scenario. Okay, I'm sure there's other things, and folks, feel free to use the raise hand feature under reactions too, if you'd like to voice any questions.
I'm just going to pull out a question from Pat, that Pat's a little lost on the arts relief funding. Understandable, Pat, it's a lot of information to take in. We can put a link. There is an arts relief page on our website that has kind of FAQs and other information. As an organization, the key for the arts relief funding is that you first need to receive general operating support. So that would either be if you are currently in the FY23 Gfo program, or you could receive that general operating support for FY23 through Creativity. But you first need to receive, as an organization, that general operating support, and then that sort of unlocks the opportunity to then apply for the additional arts relief funding. But we can certainly talk one-on-one if you have questions about your organization and what makes you eligible for that.
Great. I'm also getting some private messages. So I just wanted to uplift that if you have some more detailed questions, please contact Laura or myself. Our emails are here. You can reach out to one or both of us, and we can set up some time to chat further. Whether it's about the intent to apply, next steps, their creativity grant program, and what might be a good fit. So yes, please just send us an email, and we can set up some time together and learn a little bit more about your organizations.
A question here from Brenna is, can you share the success rate for applications? Is it highly competitive? That's a really great question, Brenna. So the applications are not competing against each other. Every application stands on its own. So there's not, a certain amount that we can fund, or, something like that. We want to fund as many applications as we possibly can. So there are some restrictions about scores and needing to score over a certain threshold in order to be recommended for funding. But we want to get as many people into the program as possible, and each application stands on its own. So we're not competing against each other. I hope that helps, but we can certainly talk about your foundation and how that might fit in.
Great. Joellen asked if there's a way to obtain an LOI template other than beginning in the application on Smart Simple. Sure. I mean, you can be in touch with us and we can help you get a different format if that's helpful for you. I will just note that, and I think Laura mentioned this, in Smart Simple, you can save your draft and come back to it at any time. And that goes for all of our programs. So it's not one of those systems where you need to sit down and complete everything all in one fell swoop. You can get it set up, save your draft, and come back to it and continue to work on it if you need to gather information along the way. Let's see here. Jeannie, I see your hand raised if you want to go ahead. Hi. And you are still on mute.
Yeah, sorry about that. Thank you for the helpful presentation. I wonder if you might address the UEI number issue. To my understanding, there's a bit of a backlog in the assignment of that. And so I just wonder what implications that affords for the application process. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for asking that, Jeannie. Yes, there is a backlog, I think, from my understanding of it as well. I would say if you are in that process, you've reached out to sam.gov, you've started that process, but perhaps you haven't received the number yet, be in touch with us so that way we can determine the best next steps for you. I think that's probably the best way to go, is just on a one-on-one basis.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Yeah, great question. I'll just add to that too, and just a reminder that this is a federal level requirement. So it is required of us because we receive federal funding to also require our grantees to have that number. So it's across the nonprofit sector and anybody who receives federal funding across the country. So yeah, thanks for going through that process. We know there's been some hiccups along the way and some delays. Okay, somebody asked about the creativity grant deadline, and I did put the link for that program in the chat as well. The creativity grant has a rolling deadline, so you can apply at any time, and that's for both general operating support along with project support. You can submit one application either or. Again, we're talking a lot about general operations, so if you're an organization, we would definitely encourage you that you apply for general operating support early on, and those applications are reviewed monthly and awarded monthly.
Just to bring up the question from Karen. Karen said that our community symphony orchestra has not met since 2020, and we did not have a budget in 2021. We used to have over 75,000 though. How can we apply? Karen, I would say let's chat, you and I, one-on-one about that scenario. It might be something that we consider creativity for the current year or two, and then get on track for GFO in the future. With the pandemic and cancellations and seasons and stuff like that, there are some other considerations to take into account. So let's talk one-on-one. If you want to shoot me an email, my email's on the screen there, and we can talk about that more.
Great. Hannah asks, once an organization is approved for funding and told their grant amount, does the formula get updated every year with the organization's new allowable income or remain the same until the next one? So that's a great question, Hannah. Yes, every year, organizations, whether you're in an on year or an off year, provide a new financial statement. So every year we're going to be looking at the most recently completed fiscal year. So everybody gets a new allowable income number. Depending on where you're at in the 3-year cycle, you might stay with your same panel score, but if you go through the on year and get a new panel score, that will be added to your formula, and the cap allocation also changes year to year. So all 3 variables will change, and that impacts the whole pool of the GFO applicants from year to year. Great question, but yes, every year, new financials, new allowable income number.
I'm just going to pull out one more question here real quick before we hit our 1 o'clock mark. And that is, if we apply for a touring roster grant, does that impact our eligibility for other Msac grants? So Brenna, for if you receive a touring grant, you can also receive GFO support. They are 2 separate programs, and you can be in both of those. So I would say certainly you can look at GFO and also be looking at the touring grant as well. There are some programs that can't overlap, but in that scenario, you would be able to do both. All right, folks, I know there are some other questions in the chat, but we are at our 1 o'clock mark here. So if we did not get to your question today, please feel free to send an email to either myself or to Emily. We are more than happy to talk one-on-one or to communicate via email. Make sure that you get your questions answered before you submit your intent to apply. But thank you so much for joining us today. Just as a reminder, those intent to apply applications are due on September 15th. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Emily, anything else before we wrap up?
I think that's about it. Thanks everybody for joining. And again, just another reminder that this was recorded, so we will post on the program page probably by next week, I would say. And we'll also add the slide deck as well. So you have all this information, and feel free to share with anybody in your organization or anyone else who wasn't able to join us today. And then we will also be having other information sessions about both types of applications moving forward. So more information there as well.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.